Hi, my name is Landon McQuitty, and sitting beside me is UIndy Director of Intercollegiate Athletics, Kim Pate. We're here to discuss the conference switch from the GLVC to the GMAC. Now, Kim, when did UIndy first receive this invitation to join the GMAC?
Yeah, it actually happened pretty quickly. It was in early April, and we had to make a decision by the end of June.
And so, what went into this decision to leave the GLVC for the GMAC? You did mention 4 key priorities: and promoting student athletic well-being, academic and institutional alignment, responsible financial stewardship, and unwavering commitment to competitive and athletic excellence. Could you expand on the strategy behind the priorities?
Well, yeah, I would say we took a deep dive and looked at everything, right? We looked at the impact on the student athlete experience, which was our top priority, right? How would this affect our student athletes' overall experience? We looked at, and that really comes down to like the travel time, the geography of the conference.
Right.
We looked at financial stewardship. Not only does the travel impact our student athlete experience, it also affects the institution's operating costs. And so looking at what the savings would be, or the cost analysis overall of the competing in either league. And certainly we felt like we were better positioned to be able to save some money for the university and invest it back into our student athlete experience.
Yeah.
And I think, also looking at alignment, the GMAC, the conference has changed a good bit, the GLVC in particular, just the makeup of the schools in the league. We've seen a lot of schools leave from the east side of the conference and a number of schools added on the west side. But we also are looking at like public versus private, different types of schools with different maybe priorities and missions. What we looked at was, is there strong alignment, with the GMAC compared to the GLVC, in the sense of, the GMAC being all private institutions with similar missions, student-centric focus and priorities, costs, enrollment size, all those things. So we looked at a lot of things and certainly arrived at, the decision that we felt like the GMAC was the best overall fit for the university.
And UIndy has been a member of the GLVC since becoming a charter member way back in 1978, so almost 50 years in the conference. Did that make it an easy or a difficult decision to make?
It absolutely made it a difficult decision, and it's probably why it's taken this long for UIndy to make the decision. I know this has been talked about for quite some time, and probably was, first kind of rose up to the level of a topic, down the hallway or within our just different stakeholders when a lot of the schools were leaving the GLVC that were on this side of our conference. So when Bellarmine and Southern Indiana and certainly Lindenwood left to go Division I, that was sort of the moment to go, okay, what is the future of the GLVC for UIndy? And that was, 4 or 5 years ago. And so here we are, I think just the invite. It also aligned well with, the timing of my arrival, because for the last year and a half, I've been really listening and talking to different stakeholders about what our opportunities are, what are the priorities, what are things I should be looking at as a new AD. And within my first week, I heard we should be looking at the GMAC. And so I noted it, went on to the next conversation, we should be looking at the GMAC. A lot of it really driving from the geography. And so when we got the invite, we felt like, yes, it's time for us to really take a good hard look at it. But it wasn't easy. I think we didn't take the decision lightly. We wanted to make sure that this was the best overall right fit for UIndy down the road.
And you mentioned the GMAC will provide student athletes and coaches with a stronger foundation. Could you just go a little more into detail and explain how it supports them as opposed to the GLVC?
Yeah, this really is about UIndy. This decision wasn't about GLVC or GMAC. It's about what's best for UIndy, what's best for the university long term. Not just thinking about next season and how that positions us, but looking out over the next 10 years. Looking at, the ability for us to have a sustainable home where we are strongly aligned with another institution or with other institutions that are similar to us, with similar focus on the full kind of comprehensive, holistic student athlete experience, while also knowing that our student athletes are not going to have to travel, 9 hours up to 7 times a year, for their seasons, and to be able to have those time savings and and sort of the impact, the positive impact on our student athletes, overall with the move. And so it was a long-term perspective, but I think that what we realized is the GMAC checks all the boxes to be able to position the university for long-term success.
And was this decision made more from an executive standpoint, or did you just see how everyone was feeling, from department to department, or, like I said, just made from the higher ups?
No, I mean, it definitely, I think the decision was a lot of conversations and feedback to be able to sort of get a input and feedback on the pros and cons, really, of the move from various stakeholders, from coaches to administrative staff to student athletes, to alumni and faculty, just to really fully understand the impact. And but taking all of that feedback and the data that we were able to compile and then take it to campus leadership. And we have a governance structure. We have an athletics committee, an intercollegiate athletics committee. We started there. That group was unanimously in support of it, and that is a group made up of faculty, student athletes, and certainly administrative staff for athletics. And then from there, it went to university cabinet leadership team. And so once we got feedback and some consensus from there, we went to the coaches and the head coaches, and they all weighed in and got feedback and support for the decision. And then it ultimately went to the Board of Trustees, who unanimously supported it as well.
So you say the coaches overall, everybody has seen it as a positive thing. So is it seen as just an opportunity of a greater challenge for the teams?
Well, and I think it's hard to get a group of, we have probably about 17 head coaches, and certainly 20 plus, folks that report to me as part of our leadership team. But it's hard to get everybody on the same page. I would say that we probably have like 90% of our staff were like, this is the right decision, this is the best decision. It wasn't necessarily based on competitive, opportunity. Because our goals and our focus is not to compete just for GLVC championships or GMAC championships. We want to compete nationally, across as many sports as possible, and we have done that. We want to continue to do that. It really was about university fit and what's best for our student athletes. And probably the piece that that everybody agreed on is just the travel has become really taxing on our student athletes to be able to travel. They have to travel. If you went to every GLVC school in 1 year, you would travel over 5.5 hours 7 times. So 7 of your 14 trips are over 5.5 hours. That's one way. And that's hard for student athletes, and coaches have seen the impact on student athletes, rolling in the middle of the night in the waking hour and then have to get up and go to class and then turn around and do it again. So I think coaches, resoundingly support that the travel and the geography and the GMAC will be a much better experience for our student athletes.
Right. So we've accepted the invitation to join the GMAC. It won't be taking place until the summer of 2027, but what would you say is going to take place in this transition process over the next course of the calendar year? Yeah,
I mean, not a lot changes. I mean, our eyes are fixed on the opportunity, to have a great last year in the GLVC, and so we continue to be a part of the GLVC conference scheduling and championships all this year. We'll have the opportunity to start joining GMAC meetings, to start thinking about the future and weighing in on some important decisions like scheduling or championships or any kind of policy changes. And so really just kind of getting onboarded and acclimated to the GMAC and make sure that we're ready to hit the ground running in a year.
And would you say this change has any impact on athletics recruiting?
I do, to some extent. I think it gets us in a whole different market, right? Because we're going to be competing in a lot in Ohio and obviously in Michigan and in Kentucky with the conference footprint. And so I think there may be some new audiences that learn a little bit more about UIndy as we're in the media and the news stories and the headlines in those markets. And so I do think it opens up new opportunities for recruitment, not just for student athletes, but also for UIndy as a university, because it gets our brand out there. But I would say that the feedback I have heard from our coaches, and this is not across every sport, because it's not a one size fits all, but a lot of our coaches are already recruiting against GMAC schools. And, you know, Coach Keevers would tell you he recruits against GMAC schools, but hardly ever against a GLVC school. And some of it is geography, right? We're closer to Ohio, so he's recruiting against kids that might be looking at Ashland or Findlay or Tiffin, but not necessarily McKendree or Quincy or S&T.
And you said this change overall just aligns with the university's goals and ideals. So would you say that this change overall impacts your overall strategy for athletics, or would you say that it more so reinforces it?
I think it does both, to be honest. I think student athlete experience is front and center in our strategic plan and in our priorities. And certainly I think there are aspects of our strategic vision and plan that we're focusing on the student athlete experience. We're also focusing and emphasizing financial sustainability and fiscal responsibility, right? The money that the dollars we'll save on travel can be invested strategically in the student experience. And so this allows us to be able to be more thoughtful and intentional about how we're spending our dollars as a university. And that's critical for every athletic department and university in the country. You know, we have to be really thoughtful about how we invest our resources and make sure that it is hitting home and being invested back in the student experience. And I think this will allow us to do that.
Absolutely. Is there anything we didn't cover you'd like to mention?
No, but I think the only thing we haven't talked about is like the competitive goals, right? The one thing that, that we've been talking about through this process, and certainly after we announced it, is like our goals competitively and academically are unchanging, unwavering, right? We still expect to compete for GLVC championships this year, and we expect to compete for GMAC championships when we roll into the league the following year. We expect to compete for the All Sports Trophy. It's called something different in the GMAC. It's the President's Cup. We expect to, to own that thing when we get into the league and start to battle it out with other schools. So our goals are the same from a conference standpoint, and certainly our eyes are set on national competition. So although we are changing conferences, this was less about competitive level. This is more about student athlete experience and overall fit. And we feel like we can be successful and perhaps even more successful in the GMAC for a number of the reasons we've already talked about.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate you taking the time. I'm very excited to see the direction that this program's headed in.
Thank you, Landon. Good luck to you this next year.
Thank you.
And congrats on being our new sports editor.
Appreciate it.